Hey folks, welcome to Unsung podcast. My name is Mark, joined by Chris. Say hi, Chris.
Hi.
This week joined by our good friend Joe.
Me again.
Joe's back.
I'm back.
Welcome back, Joe.
Thank you.
Usually he's a heavy guy, but this week we're not doing a heavy record.
Well, different kind of heavy, I suppose.
That is in places.
We've brought him in as muscle.
And
so he's still technically a heavy. a heavy.
Yes. Right. And
an enforcer.
The enforcer, I like that. It's good.
Mm-hmm.
He did just opine about how much he likes the Manic Street Preacher's Holy Bible. And
yeah, you missed that. It was off camera.
I love it.
Leslie Nielsen.
And Leslie, I mean,
he's not all that.
Yeah.
Solid.
I mean, I'd like a collab between, if Leslie Nielsen wasn't dead, of course. That'd have been pretty cool.
Everybody contains multitudes, you know what I mean? So
listen, man, I've got the most fucked up taste in music ever, man. Do you know what I mean? My favourite band's fucking Queen, and I played in a death metal band for years. What can I say?
Yeah,
I don't even like death metal.
I think that was made clear in our Cryptopsy episode.
I don't even like death metal. You know what I mean?
Sorry to throw you there, Mark. I just want people to feel they really know Joe.
Really know me.
Yeah. If we go back and listen to the Cryptopsy episode with Joe, then you'll really get to know how much he hates death metal.
How much a guy who played in a death metal band and nominated a death metal album doesn't like death metal.
No, not really.
We all have little pockets of genres that we like. That's a big thing for you, isn't it, Chris? Like,
I tend to like 2 or 3 things in any one type, and the rest can get in the sea.
I'm kind of the same. I'm not a mad genre guy either. But hardcore's maybe the exception. I like a lot of hardcore right enough.
Well, this week we're doing Revolutionary Volume 2 by Immortal Technique, which Joe picked.
Lock and load. This is the point of no return. I can never go back. Life without parole, upstate, shackled and trapped. Living in the hole, looking at the world through a crack. But fuck that. I'd rather shoot it out and get clapped. I've gone too far. There ain't no coming back for me.
Immortal Technique. I'm just translating for the people that can't deal with the speed of the Scottish accent.
Immortal Technique.
Don't want to attract any more negative comments that we got this week.
Really?
Please send them directly to us.
I'll give you a comment. Fuck you. Work harder at trying to understand it. You cunt.
That's sometimes we do get that, don't we? Like,
that's been the least of the problem this week. It's more been the Fash.
Aye, the Fash. Aye,
brilliant.
I attracted some comments on our anti-Nazi. That's definitely anti-Nazi videos.
So,
yeah, that wee question mark.
Yeah.
Is it?
Well, those questions made me comment.
What side of that argument did we come down on? Did Nazism make it into the discography? People
talking about how they're making fascist metal records on explicitly anti-fascist videos is like, well, wait,
Jesus.
How did you get it wrong here?
And mums with 1488 in their handle getting in touch to tell us about their private life. But yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you go and interview somebody that's speaking on a controversial subject. It was to be expected. If you want to stand up for your boys, then go and watch the videos on YouTube and post under them.
Exactly. Yep. Aye.
Please do that, because we like comments and we also like replying to them. Chris specifically likes replying to them.
I'm looking forward to it. I've done my stretches.
You need it with they fucking idiots.
So on to this week's topic then. Immortal Technique. Joe, let's start off by asking Joe, how did you first hear Immortal Technique?
It's probably been around about, let me think, 2005, around about then. So I mean, he'd already had like 2 albums out. Do you know what? I actually don't know, because at the time I was listening to a lot of hip hop. Do you know what I mean? I still do.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, have you been a hip hop fan all the way through, or is it something that you got into?
No, I've been into hip hop since '92. So I say that's weird. At the same time I was into metal, I was right into like Ice Cube Predator had just came out.
Goddamn, another fucking payback with a twist. The motherfucking shot, but the punks miss. Ice Cube is outgunned. What is the outcome? Will they do me like Malcolm? Cause I bust styles, new styles, standing strong.
And I was right into that, because the guy that sings in my band, his brother, he'd like a bunch of brothers, but they were all into metal, but they were just into everything. So it was great, actually. It was a really good place to.
Yeah, obviously you bridged it with people like Body Count. Introduced a lot of people in, and we spoke about it as well, like Judgment Night soundtrack and all that sort of stuff really helped bridge those 2 genres.
I mean, I was into it even before that, because I think that came out in 93 93 or something, 94 maybe. So I've been listening to hip hop since basically the early 90s.
And you came across Immortal Technique when you were
probably just on maybe the early internet or something like that. Somebody maybe mentioned
2005 wasn't all that early, trust me.
No, the internet was still a fucking thing. But I mean, it wasn't the way it is now, do you know what I mean? But I remember, like, at the time, I'll be honest, I was listening to a lot of kind of ignorant rap, you know what I mean? Like, because a lot of it at that time kind of was, you know what I mean, like proper ignorant shit. But actually, when I listened to his lyrics, I was like, man, this guy's actually got a lot going on, man. He's not just talking about. I mean, don't get me wrong, we'll get into speaking about it. Does obviously do the braggadocious shit. That I'm not so much into, but when he's on point with his lyrics and stuff like that, I think he's one of the best. Do you know what I mean?
I think it's going to be fun.
Well, to be fair, so
because the lyrical thing's going to be the bulk of what I've got to say, because just as Joe's been a hip hop fan since '92, I've never been a hip hop fan. Like, I've tried multiple times. There's some bits and bobs of it I can dabble with. I know it's not hip hop, but I nominated Saul Williams for this. There's artists that do stand out, but it's a genre that just does not land for me emotionally at all. I can hear it. I mean, I can make very superficial comments about the level of the production and the bass sounds good in that, or that's quite an interesting wee sample, but ultimately I guess it's like, I don't know, like somebody watching cricket or something. I'm just like,
it's either for you, it's
I just don't care at all about what's happening here.
It's kind of like me with reggae, man, you know what I mean? It's like I know the difference between good reggae and bad reggae, but I just don't like it. It doesn't float my boat. So I get where you're coming from. It just doesn't resonate with me.
I mean, we've done a few hip hop records on the podcast before. Saul Williams being one. Obviously, we've done MF Doom.
Point blank, right between the eyes. Any fool can get it. So don't be too surprised, guys. More funner than a clown with a gun. Run for the crumbs, the sound of the sun. To the brain, right between the eyeballs. Anybody can get it. So don't be too surprised, y'all.
MF Doom's good.
We've done POS, J Dilla, Sage Francis, Cannibal Ox, LP. One of our early episodes was Danny Brown, Billy Woods. We've not done hip hop for a little while. Lil Kim, we did Lil Kim.
You done Lil Kim? Fuck me, really?
Yeah.
That was a good one. She probably would.
Well, she probably would.
We've been done it a few times. We've been trying to do it again for a while, but I've been wanting to do De La Soul for a while, but I'm not like hugely up on them.
Right.
But I know they're very important, and they recently got other rights back, which is quite an interesting story in and of itself, because of all the sample culture, which we've not really spoke about too much. I think maybe we spoke about the sample culture when we did Public Enemy.
Major style.
Yeah, we didn't go like super deep into that, even though the production style was like heavily based on that. So yeah, coming to this era of hip hop is something we've only ever really done once with Sage Francis, A Healthy Distrust.
I think it's interesting you mentioned Public Enemy. They were also a band that came up in the Arno Michaelis episode that caused all the YouTube controversy, in the context of ostensibly quite a progressive hip-hop band that still managed from time to time to say things that I think by many standards would be pretty backwards, if not odious.
Yeah, Flavor Flav is known for his comments were in that era were a lot of anti-Semitism.
Well, I think
it was just really Griff, because he was a guy that was like the political whatever the fuck in the band. He wasn't really in the band per se musically. He was more like the guy that kind of fed them the information to kind of fuel their lyrics and stuff like that, and he came out with a bunch of anti-Semitic shit.
Said that there was not a wicked thing happened in the world without a Jew involved. Anyway, without going back down that, I think what's interesting about this week is what I can bring to the table is some context and analysis of the lyrics. And I think that's appropriate because hip-hop is a much more lyric-focused
majorly
genre. I think, obviously, that's not to say the lyrics don't matter in other genres, but I think even in talking to Weaver, Weaver likes countless bands and he couldn't tell you a single lyric by them. He's like, it just isn't something I particularly care about in the music I listen to. Yep. I don't think you can really do that in hip-hop. It's so integral to what's going on there. Yep. So I think it merits deeper analysis, because it also often determines so much of what the artist is about, what they're saying, not just how do they sound. Yep. And I think Immortal Technique's very interesting on that front, but not all positive.
Listen, man, I mean, go back and listen to this, because this is like 22 years old now, isn't it? Go back and listen to it, because I hadn't listened to it for a long time. I went back and I was like, man, I mean, if you're looking at it with a lens now, right, and going, right, some of the shit he says fucked, right? And I don't agree with all of it. I'm not saying I totally agree with everything he's saying, I don't. But he says enough that is on point that I can kind of You know what I mean? Like, I can just say, right, okay, there's some shit there that's, okay, you're off the mark completely there, but there's enough on point that I think, you know, he brings a lot of really interesting stuff up about, you know, like the prisons, like basically they're just putting people in prison to basically fucking for labour. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. And then like street stuff he talks about, you know, he's not just talking about the whole, you know, the gang versus the gang type shit, although he does do a bit of that. He talks about more like the kind of the bigger picture and, you know, where the drugs come from into the hood. So he was really intelligent in that respect, you know what I mean? So I'm not by any means like saying everything that he says I'm like on board with him, no. And I've got to admit, I don't just listen to stuff to be like completely and utterly on board with like everything like somebody says, right? I listen to it to enjoy it as well. So I do enjoy his flow as well, which is a really important part of hip hop. So it's not only just what he's saying, it's the way he says it, the way, certain things, because I was a lyricist in my band. That's one of the reasons I love hip hop, because like you were saying, in metal I don't really listen to lyrics that much, but in hip hop that is exactly what I focus on, do you know, and the way that they say it and the way they come back around to things. So it's the wordplay. Yeah, but I get what you're saying. There is something. I think
it's interesting. I don't have it in my notes, but it does occur to me that we should probably reclaim the word woke for this particular episode, because that sort of represents something very different now. It's kind of a culture wars thing, and it's to do with like progressive politics and things like that, and the far left. But woke started in hip hop and in around that kind of culture, and it was about
in the 70s and 80s. It was like words
about being aware of the bigger things that were happening in society. So things that Joe's talking about, referring to, which are, as you say, amongst some of the things that he's very good when he's on about, you know, the military industrial complex, the prison systems, things like all that kind class of struggle. Some of the stuff that he says, a lot of the stuff that he says about the CIA, bits and bobs about the FBI, he's quite woke to the injustices of the system, and that used to be that was the origin of that phrase. It's morphed over time. So when we refer to that, it is good. I just want to kind of keep returning to that caveat, especially when we're clipping it up for TikTok. You know, not saying this guy's woke in the sense that, you know, he cuts about in a pink hat refuses to drink anything but plant milk. I mean, like, it's certainly not, in fact, if you go by the lyrics of Beef and Broccoli. But exactly. I just mean that this guy is woke in that kind of original sense, and that he's taking the time to think about the context in which things are happening, and not just obsess about the day-to-day rivalries in the street and all that kind of shit. Exactly. However, that said, a lot of that shit he gets wildly wrong, and I'm going to go into that in a bit of depth. But as you said, due diligence. Who is this guy? Where's he from? What's he all about? Felipe Coronel, I'm guessing it's pronounced. I don't know if there should be an accent in there. Maybe there is. Born 78. He's actually born in a military hospital in Lima in Peru, capital of Peru. His family left Peru in 1980 to move to Harlem to get away from the civil war that was happening in Peru at the time. He was at school with, is it Lin-Manuel Miranda? Is it
that's the name?
The actor from Hamilton, hugely successful American play, who he apparently bullied and threw in a bin at least once.
I'm laughing at that.
He was also in the same class as Chris Hayes, who's a big American political journalist and TV host. I think he has a show on CNN. He did a year in jail as a result of a fight that happened at Penn State University when he was enrolled there. Apparently it wasn't the only fight he got into. I think he was brawling quite a lot back then. He used that time in jail to work on his rapping, and also to make himself aware of some interesting subjects that crop up in his material. He started to participate in the rap battle circuit once he left, which earned him quite a bit of acclaim. He won a lot of stuff on there, won a bit of money on there. He also studied political science for 2 semesters. This was like one of the conditions of staying with his dad when he came out of jail. His dad said you have to go to college. Did political science for 2 semesters, which I would suggest is just long enough to sort of get you pilled, but not long enough to actually learn much. So that, for me, is significant.
Okay. Opaque.
His approach to releasing records, I think, is one of the most compelling things about this guy. So we're doing Revolutionary Volume 2. Revolutionary Volume 1 came out, and rather than looking for distribution through one of the many rap labels at the time, and he was certainly highly thought of.
So it's inconsequential, really, all the shit that you talk, all the bullshit that you stand for. It's more important what you're ready to build, what you're ready to pass down to your children, what you're ready to create.
He was approached by Sony and at least Sony and Def Jam made like 6-figure.
Yeah, and given the rep that he had on the battle circuit and stuff like that, you would imagine that it wouldn't have been too hard for him to get a deal. He chose not to, though. Chose to self-release and self-distribute with that first album. In fact, I think I'm right in saying that he actually also self-released this initially, but then it was picked up. It was picked up by Viper Records.
That Viper,
Viper Records becomes quite a big part of his story. I mean, he spends a lot of time in a lot of his tracks and a lot of his interviews, of which there are many, and many of which I have watched in the last week. He spends a lot of time critiquing music industry. 99% of the time he's bang on about it. It's all stacked against small artists, it's stacked against diversity. We've gone on about this ad nauseum in this podcast. It's a very self-interested thing, especially back when there was still a lot of money in the tank for the record industry. It's a bit different now that it's desperate. Viper Records, though, was a label started by a guy called Jonathan Stewart in 2000. I think it's interesting because obviously a lot of this is about class, and he self-releases and he comes up the hard way, and it's, there's a lot of his mythos built around being the self-made man. Well, Jonathan Stewart actually started that label to release his own album, New Prohibitions, I think, which was an album specifically just about weed. And he financed it by selling Norman Rockwell paintings that he'd inherited for tens of millions of pounds.
Wow.
Dollars.
Holy fuck, I didn't know that.
I think one of the paintings alone sold for 60 million.
What?
I mean, just like wild numbers.
Jesus Christ.
So Jonathan Stewart had a lot of money behind Immortal Technique at the start in Viper Records. And so some people, like, going through some of the boards and watching some of the hip-hop community talk about it, they're like, look, it's a nice fairy story that this guy was a completely self-made man, but things really kicked off for him once a rich white guy partnered up with him and was really into his music, and that did help.
Of course,
because it's all very well try to do it yourself and try to do it DIY, but with that kind of budget behind you, allows you to really compete. Although all the ingredients were clearly there to enable him to succeed already, sometimes the system's just stacked against you. So he gets into this partnership with this guy. I think Immortal Technique became the CEO of Viper.
I think he eventually took a stake in it
for a while, and then he became, I think he's now listed as the co-owner, which I would assume is still with Jonathan Stewart, because Jonathan Stewart still, I think it's still on his LinkedIn or something like that, as his career. Anyway, their latest web bio, which I think is quite interesting, is we began in 2000 with a simple goal of releasing music to tell the history of marijuana. Viper Records was created to level an uneven playing field between artists and labels. When the Twin Towers fell, we knew that it was vital to protect artists that had a message. That's really interesting to me. That's in their bio, and it's not a long bio, and that is in there, that when the Twin Towers fell, they thought this is a really important moment for us to step up to, quote, protect artists that had a message. What message was that you suddenly had to protect? And I think we'll obviously uncover a wee bit of that as we go. It's worth mentioning this guy's community work, Immortal Technique's community work. It's pretty exceptional. He regularly visits prisons to especially speak to the youth in there. He's worked alongside a lot of immigrants' rights activists. He raises money for children's hospitals, including hospitals overseas. He created a writing grant program for high school students, I believe. And I think one of the biggest feathers in his cap is in 2006 he was approached by an Afghan-American woman named Shamsia Rizaki. She had just formed a non-profit organisation called Umaid International. Now he went on to raise, I think it's some places it says 50, other places it says about $60,000, $60,000 for Umaid International through a series of benefit concerts and from the sales of the CD The Third World that he brought out. He then travelled to Afghanistan to help establish an orphanage in Kabul alongside this group and some others. Now, I had to be looking into the legacy over there, because that was quite some time ago, and I think the orphanage is now closed, but I think the orphanage had 17 kids, young boys exclusively, and they were all successfully raised to adulthood and left to go into the world, as far as I understand it. So mission accomplished. It's not like an ongoing institution as I understand it, but certainly it made a big difference in their lives, and it just is just a pretty marvellous thing to do. I did kind of try to find out a wee bit about Omaid, and it is interesting. There's not a lot out there about it. And what I did find fascinating was that for a long time, they were coming up in Twitter searches because of their insistence on using the hashtag RT for peace, which is Russia Today, which is the Russian state-owned disinformation channel that, for example, is now banned completely in this country because it propagates such absolute bullshit. And so Omaid seemed very in bed with that. I don't quite know why they got on board with that. But again, just a little comment about the Twin Towers. Okay, now there's some kind of tie-in with Russia Today. You can kind of maybe start to see where I think, for me, a lot of the arrows are pointing. The elephant in the room with this guy is his politics. For good and bad, as I've said, more so than any other, rap is a lyrical genre. So what's the content of these songs is really, really significant. So he's a lefty. He's a big-time lefty, mostly.
Yep.
Mostly he's a big-time lefty, sort of. Mainly, he's a big-time lefty. He's a libertarian, maybe at points. He's a bit of a libertarian, maybe he's something else at points. But he's a lefty primarily. And before anybody panics as well, I think we're broadly a very lefty show. I think we've established our credentials. I think the recent comments on YouTube, the kind of enemies we're making will probably affirm our woke, Antifa, virtue signal and libtard credentials for everybody. So I think it's interesting, an outspoken left-wing political perspective that he has. His family fled Peru in 1980 to escape the civil war. The government in Peru is a military dictatorship at the time, and they were absolute fucking bastards, unquestionably. But likewise was The Shining Path. The Shining Path, even that name, if you've read about the history of this group, just it should evoke a wince, because The Shining Path were absolute motherfuckers as well. That was kind of effectively the self-adopted name for the Communist Party in Peru, and it was without doubt one of the most bloodthirsty partisan groups that has existed in modern history. I mean, there's not just years and years of like smaller crimes. There are a couple of really big incidents, including like massacres of villages, massacres of peasants who they felt were not on board with their cause, trade unionists, politicians who they didn't think were suitably left-wing. And this is all in pursuit of this Marxist-Leninist, especially Maoist, like he's quite Maoist, cultural revolution that they were after. So I think, given that the guy came from that background in Peru, where yes, a right-wing military junta was running the country, but a left-wing terror group, which I mean they're technically classed as by the EU and America and various other countries, were also committing all these atrocities around their country. He goes to America, he becomes very, very vocal and outspoken about the American political system, and fair enough, there's more than enough ammunition there to justify doing so. But he's still, I mean, the first album has a sickle and a microphone on the cover, and I know some of his fans have got sickle and microphone tattoos. It's like, I think there's an incredible inconsistency in that. I mean, he has spoken out and says that he feels that communism just hasn't worked because it wasn't the originators that were able to put it into practice. It was people that came after them and manipulated it to their own ends, to which I would argue that, for example, in Russia, from the very start, the Tsar's family, the Tsar, like men, women and children, the Tsar's servants, the Tsar's doctor, 2 of the Tsar's dogs were killed. And then, Vladimir Lenin came out and endorsed that, said that's just what had to be done. So the level of granular detail he goes into with his criticism of the American political system and the American political actors just doesn't seem to be maintained in analysis of his own political mindset. That's my first point. What do you guys think?
I like the album, man.
I think,
he's full of praise for Che Guevara. And I think he might want to, for example, take a look at the draconian drug measures that Guevara brought in when he was serving with Castro. Cuba was, and actually to some extent still is, one of the strictest countries for even things like marijuana in the world. The punishments they meted out for that were severe in the extreme, which is ironic because there are first-hand accounts of people sitting with Guevara and Castro smoking joints. So again, it just speaks to me of a real lack of consistency in his outlook on things.
I think with the communist point, that's what you've said is often a criticism that's labelled towards people who think communism is the path forward. The shining path, some may say.
Yeah, shiny and red.
Yeah.
Shiny and red.
Shiny and red.
Just like Peru in 1980.
I guess there are definitely cogent arguments out there saying that, you know, what we've seen in reality of communism hasn't actually been communism as Marx and Engels envisioned it. Could be true, I don't know. But I do think that if you're looking around the world and you're thinking that, oh, the reason this has failed in all these different places was because nobody's done it right, but you still want to do that thing, then there's got to be something you need to kind of look at, some common denominator involved.
It's the height of self-deception. You know, it's like if I think Marx and Engels came up with an abstract philosophy that has a lot about it that is likeable. Does it marry with human nature? Time and time and time again, millions and millions of dead bodies suggest this doesn't actually work when you put it into practice with human nature being a thing.
I don't know what I think. I think there is a fair point in the human nature piece, but I'm not an optimistic person. I think, you know, we can be better and maybe use a system like that in a way which doesn't always fall down at corruption, basically.
There's a lot of different other options on the path to communism. There's a lot of nuance, social democracy, democratic socialism, there's anarcho-communism, there's a lot of different things. I think with communism it inevitably boils down to an authoritarian regime, because people have to be made to do labour and they have to be made to surrender goods. There's a lot of enforcement that goes hand in hand with communism, where the state takes harvests and redistributes them forcefully, and it's an authoritarian system. So if you don't like authoritarianism, you've got a problem there. There are other things on the route to that I would very strongly be willing to hear out. But I think it's pretty clear from countless examples now that it's atrocious. And it was atrocious in Cuba. And I don't understand why he doesn't apply that same standard to it in his rhetoric. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's totally right to criticise neoliberalism, absolutely, no question. But
well, I don't have the answer to that question, obviously, right? But because I don't know why he doesn't do it.
This is one of the problems when I think he's held up, and I get why people hold him up as a guy who's willing to tackle meatier subjects and talk about loftier things, and that's commendable. Except it's very, very quickly apparent to me that there is a lack of self-awareness in a lot of what he does.
I agree. I would also point out that he's only ever did 3 albums, right? And his last album was The Third World, right? So I don't think he's recorded any music in nearly 20 years,
he's been working on the Middle Passage for about 20 years.
Exactly, right. So what I would maybe counter to that is, you went back to what you were saying about, he did the 2 years, and you were saying that's probably just enough to scratch the surface and all that type of shit,
He did 2 semesters.
2 semesters, right?
Just about a year, probably.
And then he pretty much immediately went into doing these records and these songs, right? So you could probably, I'm not arguing that he's right, turning the blinkers on to all the fucked up shit that comes with communism and just, and attacking capitalism. I don't mean that, but what I mean is you got to remember this was 2023, so he's a year older than me, so he'd been 25 year old, so he's still quite a young guy. I guarantee if he was older or was to tackle these same subjects now, I think you'd have probably more rounded view on the bigger picture, rather than just like you're saying, just myopic, just focusing in on this is what's wrong with America and the answer's fucking communism or whatever the fuck.
Psychologically tainted philosophy, conservative political right-wing ideology, glued together sloppily, the blasphemy of a nation. Got my back to the wall cause I'm facing assassination, Guantanamo Bay, federal incarceration. How could this...
I could maybe put it down to that.
Clearly has
naive or whatever.
An evolution in his thinking as he's grown, right? Because the Third World doesn't really talk so much about revolutionary, quote-unquote, revolutionary politics. Right. It's all about how the First World exploit the Third World, which is obviously something that he feels quite passionately about.
Yeah, I mean, he's a man of mixed heritage. He's sort of Amerindian,
French African. He's quite mixed.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think Joe's probably right. Maybe if he released an album now, it would be slightly different. I didn't come across, you probably would know more than I would, any interviews recently over the past 5 years or so where he's been speaking that in depth about politics, but there's a whole wealth of stuff out there from when he was getting up, coming up. Absolutely. When he talks about it, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not trying to defend him, I'm just saying there's probably a bit of level of nuance we need to kind of leave space for in our head, just in case it does exist.
Look at it. So there's a lot of long form interviews out there with him that give you more insight, including with Joe Rogan. But I think none are so notorious as his appearance on InfoWars, which I thoroughly enjoyed watching from start to finish for this fucking podcast. Thank you, Mark.
Hey, it wasn't my choice, and two, you listen to knowledge, right? You know how full of shit Alex Jones is.
So this was in 2013, right. Okay, so a lot more recently, and this was a period when Alex Jones wasn't quite so fully flagged, you know, and he loved to get alternative figures onto that show. He'd actually done one at that time recently with KRS-One, right, who, to be honest, as far as I'm aware, came out with a lot of the same sort of patter.
Word. We stand out. Word. We don't want to sound like that bullshit. Let them all be aware. Not at all will I care. You got to know it's about the flow when you coming in here. Now how long is your head? But how long will you hit?
Immortal Technique is an absolute mug on this interview. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. I mean, for everything that Alex Jones says that he agrees with, I would imagine there's probably about 100 things that Immortal Technique wouldn't agree with Alex Jones on, but he doesn't really challenge much. They do this weird dance of compliance, and it's something that Alex Jones is very good at. Alex Jones reminds me of a bit of a cold reader. You know, when people go to those kind of things where they're like, oh, I'm getting a spirit, do we have a John, a Jack, a Jackie, you know, and his ability to take cues and change what he's saying on those cues spot, to keep the person on his good side. So all the way through that interview, you see Alex Jones scrutinising him. He'll say something, and if he very quickly thinks that, oh, the guest isn't going to agree with me in that, he'll be like, oh yeah, because you know it's and he'll change it, and he'll twist it and be like, yeah, you're totally right. And so the whole thing is an exercise in keeping them seeming like they're on the same side of the argument, even though there are definitely a couple of points, such as Alex Jones's comments, the bit where he does sort of challenge him and asks him, what's your opinion on Hamas and Israel and stuff like that, and Alex Jones basically just says something that's absolutely antithetical to what Alex Jones usually says about that. It's a bit of a lie. But he just sits there nodding. They get into like Second Amendment fundamentalism, for example, and that's just a bit uncomfortable.
Our guest, but he goes by Tech. Immortal Technique is here in studio with us with the beautiful Barrett 50 cal. And Immortal, are you getting a little bit excited right here? You got to admit, that is a beautiful piece of work right there, isn't it?
Somebody spent a lot of time creating this thing. Someone used their imagination very, very well, and I'm pretty sure they were overcompensating for something as well.
Well, yeah,
the Immortal Technique actually makes a comment like, this gun could take down an aeroplane, right? And they're sitting there talking about, you know, the usefulness of keeping, you know, people in the hood armed and all that kind of stuff. And Alex Jones is trying to pretend that he's not said that, you know, guns get put in the hood so black people will kill each other, which is stuff that he does say, right? Yeah. Immortal Technique kicks that whole interview off with this dead sort of spineless comment about, oh, people really have the wrong idea about you.
I think, you know, first of all, I appreciate the introduction. And I also want to say that, you know, it's interesting to be on this program because a lot of people will approach me and they'll be like, I can't believe you're going to do this show. And I think that there are a lot of perceptions about yourself that that people have the wrong idea about. And I'm more than willing to sit here and have a tempered, relaxed, calm discussion about some of these things, because I think, you know, you're not one of these guys who came out and said the whole fascism started with the black guy crowd. You know what I mean? I remember you from the Bush administration.
Which I think is, even back then, is pretty fucking weak. There's a lot more stuff that's problematic in here. The two have a lot of seriously different opinions that don't really seem to come up a lot. One of these guys, Alex Jones, is trying to give the false impression of consensus, and the other one, I think, on this evidence, lacks the sharpness and the courage in the moment to actually stop certain comments in their tracks. He just nods past problematic things and indeed even just schisms in their worldviews. I think the worst moment, and I think this is telling, and this is why I'm bringing it up, not just to rubbish him, but just to sort of try and dig down into who actually is this guy behind this sort of rep that he's got. Sandy Hook comes up, and Immortal Technique is in the process of trying to highlight the hypocrisy of the Democrats. He does this bit about how, you know, you see Obama going on stage and crying about the kids at Sandy Hook. And Alex Jones, as soon as he said Obama crying about Sandy Hook, Alex Jones says, totally fake, by the way.
Huge pass. Like, I wanted to ask him this. I really hope when he gets out of office, I say to him, you know what? I saw you on TV shed tears for children from Sandy Hook.
Totally fake.
Without even that, without injecting that vitriol into the conversation, I want to ask...
Now, that in 2013 was an abomination of a thing to say. It was an abomination, I think, to say at any point. I mean, people probably know that a judge found against Alex Jones to the value, or to his company, to the value of $1.5 billion in 2022, I think it was. He's repeatedly claimed that the children that were murdered were not murdered. He's led to their parents being constantly harassed and accused of, like, you know, staging this whole thing. I mean, it's truly disgusting. It really is like the lowest of the low from InfoWars, and that's pretty fucking low. By the way, people think that Alex Jones was ruined. Alex Jones's ultimate personal payment out there is that over $7 million he has to pay half of his income to these families a year. So Alex Jones can make $7 million before that kicks in a year. So just when you're thinking that he got it, you know, he got real rough justice, no, he didn't. But anyway, Immortal Technique says this thing about Sandy Hook. Alex Jones is totally fake, by the way, and he obviously immediately looks a bit uncomfortable, but his reply is, so without even injecting that material into the conversation, and then he just continues making his point. He does not stop and say, whoa, no, wait a minute, man.
He doesn't challenge him on it.
Little kids got massacred with shotguns. Like, what are you talking about? You can't say. He doesn't do that. And that just speaks to me like a lack of moral character in that moment. I'm more keen to make this go well than I am to actually come on here and speak truth to power, because that's what it's about, speaking truth to power.
Which is weird, because I agree, he should have he should have basically challenged him on it, but it's weird because did you watch the documentary about him?
Alex Jones?
On
there's a documentary. He bigs it up on that
but like, you know, he was always very, very confrontational. You know, he shows his early career and stuff like that. Like you were talking about the AR people for Sony showed up, and there was guys that were with him. Basically, he said, "Fuck these guys for coming to see me," to their faces. So it's weird that he's meant for being this guy that everybody was saying like would be absolutely in people's faces and telling them like you're fucking wrong, blah blah blah, this or that, to obviously kind of appease this fucking idiot.
It just feels like such low hanging fruit, though. Knowing you're being filmed, to tell two douchebags for Sony Records, as opposed to sitting across a table from a guy who's just said that kids that were shot to death didn't die and that it was a scam, and to not even pull it, it's shitebaggery of the worst kind. And the fact that he paints himself as this revolutionary, it's like, mate, fucking get a grip. Like, honestly, that is pathetic. In that moment, it was enraging to watch that happen. I lost a lot of respect for the guy.
I agree, but in the same token, he has did so much stuff for a lot of people, do you know what I mean? So is he wrong for no fucking doing that? 100%. Aye, he is 100%, and he should have chinned the cunt for it without a doubt. But I don't think I can take that one reaction, you know, that he didn't react properly and then tarnishes entire everything that he's done.
There's a lot of stuff in that interview, but you're
probably right.
In terms of my personal perspective on it, his politics is a mess. He comes across repeatedly as a 9/11 truther, which I've got no time for. So we could probably speculate on some other comorbidities that tend to go along with 9/11 trutherism. He makes paranoid lyrical references to man-made bioweapons. We'll touch on one of those. You know, there's a famous conspiracy theory about AIDS being manufactured to kill black people by, you know, white scientists. He's a GMO fanatic, which is a fucking another bugbear. His take on firearms, as I've said, seems confused at best.
I was going to pick up on that point a little bit, actually. There are a lot of rappers who are like second.
Yeah, your boy from Run the Jewels.
Let's not talk about him. He's kind of fucking...
That's Killer Mike.
He's kind of fallen a wee bit off the deep end since he's become like a landlord, and kind of, he's hanging about doing tours with Dave Chappelle, you know what I mean? Like, Killer Mike is an interesting character these days, shall we say.
Too much weed.
Probably too much weed.
By the way, I honestly... It's funny because in the Alex Jones episode they do actually get into a talk about that, and Alex Jones is kind of making the point that it's a really awkward talk because they obviously totally disagree, but they try to fudge the conversation together to make it like they agree. And Alex Jones is like, oh, it's only bad because in the ghetto you're getting bad weed and that fucks with your head, but good weed is good for you. I mean, it's just total bullshit. On COVID, I think you get the best illustration of the guy, and actually I mean this in quite a balanced way, because I do want to try and paint a very nuanced picture here. And by the way, I wrote all these notes for the perspective of, if this guy ever heard this podcast, I want to be able to stand by what I'm saying here, right?
Obviously.
I think COVID gives you a really interesting illustration with the guy, right? Because he tries really hard to thread the needle between science and conspiracy in a bunch of videos that he did for YouTube during the pandemic. He is clear in saying that COVID-19 is not a hoax. Straight out the bag, that was just a fucking sigh of relief for me. You know, I was like, he distinguishes it from other coronaviruses, which is good, because people are like, oh, it's the same virus as the cold, and you're like, no, mate, it's the same family. It's not the same virus. It's not the same thing.
The flu doesn't turn your fucking blood into jelly.
Yeah, we were talking about somebody who suffered incredibly badly for coronavirus because of this. He makes clear that elderly people in particular are at risk and need help. They need your protection. He makes that point, which is great. And he says they need your help. If you are insisting on going out there and walking about and breaking the lockdowns, go and be useful. Do things that help people in the community that are struggling and can't go out and can't take those risks. He pushes back against that kind of line about Mexican immigrants were being targeted because of, you know, being accused of bringing COVID into the country. He pushes back on that. It's all useful stuff. And I think that's kind of what this kind of shouts to the impression I'm left with the guy. He's well-meaning in so many ways, right? But he just can't do that without also giving a platform to supposed, quote, Japanese scientists who've said that COVID was a US military bioweapon. He can't help himself but put that in there. He then says that the main foe is panic and fear in COVID-19, and you know what could possibly create more panic and fear than thinking your own government engineered a weapon, unleashed it on its own people, and is now trying to use it to steal away all your civil rights and lock you in the house. I mean, it's so irresponsible. So there's this, in one hand, he's got panic and fear as the enemy here, and then you're spreading scenarios that are
panic and fear.
Horrendous, like horrific. I mean, a natural pathogen, if it is a natural pathogen, which it probably is, but it might not be. But the fact is, a pathogen is scary enough. What you don't need is to then think that your government is using it to steal you away and kill you. I mean, it's to ethnically cleanse people. It's just, that to me is just absolutely staggering. He really lacks self-awareness in those key moments. He also asks if COVID is the beginning of draconian measures, as though, it's an erosion of civil liberties. He's unhappy about vaccine mandates. He probably has a lot of thoughts on the companies that made a lot of money out of those vaccines, albeit they also managed to save millions of lives with those vaccines in record time. He finishes that video with something that I think is a beautiful summation here. He says, I think there is a difference between being intelligent and thinking you're smart. Right now, people know very little. They think they know a lot, but they actually know very little. And I think that Immortal Technique is an intelligent man that is nowhere near as smart as he thinks he is, but doesn't know that. And that is the problem. And I think he's basically got a good heart, but he doesn't have the humility that goes with real intelligence, where real intelligence makes you aware of what you really don't know. And certainly people who are academic know to stay in their lane, or that they should try and stay in their lane and not try and speak with authority and speculate irresponsibly, especially when people are looking up to you.
So we do this podcast?
Yeah, but I think seeding things like, the Japanese scientists have said that this was at a US... I struggle to find the point in their podcast where we've done something like that. Mm-hmm. The reason this guy struggles in these situations, in these kind of interviews, is because he has no coherent worldview. He's the perspective of a teenager. With that real intense political passion that comes with being a teenager. I had it, I'm sure we all had it, where you're adamant that this is right. I mean, I was like fucking absolutely gorging on Chomsky books and being certain that this was the way the world was, and I had special knowledge on the America's actually the bad guy and all that kind of stuff. But it's thinking about it so inconsistent. You know, and Alex Jones, for example, he can go through 80 minutes with Alex Jones, and the only way he's able to do that is because he has big gaps in his worldview that allow a lot of things to slip past and slip through and be obfuscated. It's kind of pick and mix, I think, his perspective. And, you know, that thing about a broken clock, I think this guy's right more than twice a day. I probably agree with a lot of what the guy believes, but I think he's really not right on certain things. And I think the fact that he's sort of not only going out there and doing it and asserting it, but the fact that also so many people look up to him and have now built up this rep from being like the educated, informed rapper. Yes, a lot of what he says has great value and seems very well-meaning, but I think a lot of what he says is quite irresponsible. And I think to nail the coffin on this observation that, I know, sorry, it's a bit protracted, but it's the only thing I've got to contribute here, because when you start talking about the music, I'm going to be fucking sitting here twiddling my thumbs. The Tate brothers. So the most damning thing I can possibly level at this guy comes in the form of a 3-minute segment on the Tate brothers YouTube show, Andrew Tate and his brother. Andrew starts this clip off by saying, you can be so stupid, you're smart.
So when things are cyclical, they all go, you can have two extremes which end up being very close together. I'll give you an example. Some people are so stupid that they're smart.
True.
Like some people can be so dumb. Like people imagine the world in a straight line, but it's not in a straight line. It's in a circle, right? So you think they're stupid and smart, but in reality, it's
which I think is beautiful. And then describes how Immortal Technique is so left-wing that he practically agrees with everything that Andrew Tate believes. If you go far left enough, you end up pretty close to conservative right-wing. You believe everything is corrupt and systems are corrupt. You end up believing the same things. So we actually agree on most of the same things. Take that to the bank. When Andrew Tate is singing your praises on his show because you agree the same things as he does because you've gone so far left and he's so far right that you've actually come to the same conclusions about nothing being trustworthy, post-truth in a nutshell, then you need to fucking reappraise your worldview. That is not somebody you want to have in the jacket of your book, Andrew fucking Tate. And by the way, Andrew Tate even points out that Immortal Technique shared one of his videos on his socials as well.
I would say that last thing is a bit responsible, but I think there's probably some context that needs to be added there, because one of the things the left has always done, regardless of whether it's the far left or the moderate left, if you want to put it that way, is critiquing power structures. The right do that as well, but the ends for doing these things are completely different on either side. You know what I mean? Andrew Tate's probably thinking to himself, oh, well, yeah, he doesn't trust anything. I was like, no, he trusts him for completely different reasons. Like, he sees it for, like, not just class, but also race. Do you know what I mean? And like, Andrew Tate is clearly a fucking racist. He's obviously an absolute piece of shit. Do you know what I mean?
I'll be honest, I'm not even particularly clued up on the extent of Andrew Tate's out and out racism. I've never really followed that. I just know the guy's a misogynist piece of shit. Like, definitely right wing politically. So I can't label him a racist. I don't know that.
But I mean, ultimately, it comes down to the fact that, well, like I said, the critique, maybe just because you think the government's corrupt, he thinks the government's corrupt in a completely different way than Immortal Technique would.
It doesn't seem to think he does, and I'm not entirely sure that he does.
I don't think Andrew Tate is smart enough to know the difference.
I would bet
you know what I mean?
True, but I'll be honest, I'm not convinced that Immortal Technique's smart enough either.
Well, one of the things when we go through discography is, you said he's got some positions that you agree with, and
of course, he's got plenty.
I'm pretty sure those opinions that you agree with that Immortal Technique has are probably the opinions that Andrew Tate maybe doesn't agree with. Do you know what I mean? So, like, things, for example, I think it's fine to be distrustful of institutions, government institutions, because we should hold them at a high standard at all times.
I don't think distrustful is the right word there. I think
Immortal Technique is. I think Andrew Tate probably is in a completely different kind of way.
No, but I'm not. You're saying it's fine to be. I don't think it's fine to be. I think it's fine to be vigilant, and it's fine to be critical. Distrustful, inherently distrustful, I think goes a little bit too far for me. I'm not trying to be, I'm a pedant here, but
it's a bit pedantry.
Well, no, but I do think it speaks to a mindset where you just don't trust anything, and it does lead down that path where everybody's.
It's poisonous. You're not subjective about anything, then you just automatically default. If you're extreme left, everything's fucked up. Do you know what I mean? I do agree with you there, that you need to have some sort of sway in the middle where you can like understand the nuances of everything. You can't just say, right, I'm lefty, so therefore everything that falls under that category I agree in wholeheartedly. Do you know what I mean? So I agree with that.
I promise it's my last thought on this, but I will just say, I think in a more meta level, what this speaks to on both sides is an othering. And one of the worst things that can happen in any political movement is when you start othering groups of people. Othering is how you apportion blame. So, in the case of Jews, obviously that was a big one. But see, when people speak about institutions, governments, police, when they speak about them as others, as things that are almost inhuman, that are designed
to strip them of that,
and oppress them, like who are... Those are made of people as well, and this is part of the problem, is getting through to people that these organisations are people like you and me. Yes, certainly the ones that have loads of money and stuff will be corrupted by that, and they'll have different objectives and things like that. I'm not saying we all have the same motivations, but they are fundamentally people, and it's othering, whether it's Immortal Technique, others things constantly. It's othered, it's this, a conspiracy by these things, these organisations, these faceless organisations. Now, Who you make responsible for that then varies. The right wing have historically often made the Jews responsible for that. The left wing too sometimes. But the left wing then make it, bankers, or they make it fucking this or that. Like, the othering of the police, I think, is a really sort of sinister thing in society, because they're people as well. We might not agree with a lot of the practices of the institution, but it's people that take part in it. And what othering also does is it more or less like takes the burden of blame away for you. So you as a person don't have to bear the blame for these things that happen.
Because I'm not part of that.
Yeah, it was it was the bad guys that did it, and I'm a helpless victim. And I actually think that's really, really unhealthy. I don't think it's my fault that Glasgow Council is a piece of shit, but I do also think I'm a human and human nature, and that's all something that we have to address in us. And the same things that annoy me about Glasgow Council, I need to make sure I don't do them in my life. Yeah. When you get to this extent of political rhetoric, I don't think you're necessarily keeping an eye on yourself. You're othering the problems were someone else, by some unknown force, and that really concerns me, and I don't think it's healthy.
I think that's probably right to be concerned about that, but you've already spoken about how he also has a history of actually going out and being active in the community and helping. So it's like he sees these functions, he sees these oppressions, he sees those imbalances in power, and goes out and tries to fix it.
He does. He does. Some of the more cynical commentators on the hip hop forums were saying it's kind of tokenistic. He does these things, then he goes up and spouts off about 9/11, and he does those good things to make himself feel better, like he's a good guy when he's not a good guy. I don't share that opinion. I've never raised £60,000 for an orphanage. I have a lot of respect for that, but I do think there is a grotesque inconsistency that makes him swing between really commendable acts and really unimpressive rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's got a entirely coherent and cogent worldview.
No, some people have a more cogent view. And not that many of them. We're not all held up as bastions of the truth.
Well, I guess that's the thing that I was going to pick up on.
He's built his brand on that.
Is that was the thing that I was going to pick up on when we go through the records. It's just generally this idea that he's held up as being, someone that speaks truth to power, and he does an element of that. He clearly does, right? Like,
when it's convenient.
Yeah. Well, like you said, critiquing neoliberalism. Do you know what I mean? Like talking about the prison systems and all that kind of stuff. Like that's woke, old school kind of woke stuff.
Pretty easy rhetoric, though.
Very much so.
He's not able to continue it at a desk with Alex Jones.
But then, but I'm not saying that to fully defend him. I'm saying, but then it starts to fall over the line when you become. I've got the secret knowledge that 9/11 was an inside job. That he talks about Osama bin Laden being on dialysis and CIA arranging all of 9/11, and him seeing bombs going off in one of the bridges in New York whilst he watched the towers fall and all that. And it's like, well, okay, mate, cool, if that's what you want to believe, but I'm not necessarily sure that that's. I mean, you're giving with one hand and taking away with another. There,
that's it. Yeah,
you know what I mean.
We'll go through the discography because I think there will be things that pop out, and I do want to try and get more of a focus in the music now. Unfortunately, like I said, I'm not going to be able to contribute a lot to music, so I'm like, that sounds alright. So
cool. Let's start. So Revolutionary Volume 1.
Yo. Immortal Technique disintegrates mics when I spit. I cause more casualties than sunken slave ships. Full to capacity, I bring tragedy to rap without my man Gaddafi. The government took Nazi scientists from Germany to design.
What is your thoughts?
2001?
2001, yep. First record.
So she's first one.
Really interesting. Can we just say this came out exactly 1 week after the Twin Towers fell?
That's right.
He's not really had a lot of time to come up with a catalysed thought and whether or not it was because it's not until the next record when he starts falling down the 9/11 truth rabbit hole.
Do you think he even had time to celebrate the record coming out? I mean, fucking, like, honestly, it's like, oh my god, he's fucking so busy trying to watch replays of Building 7, fucking work out the temperature of fucking steel beams and jet fuel at the time,
like that probably wasn't even in his
part. But
it's still a political record.
I mean, he financed this using the money that he won in the rap battles, which is very cool.
That's right. And he recorded it in multiple studios, so it wasn't like one cohesive project in the sense that he went in, well, I'm going to record an album, maybe do tracks here, do tracks there, and then he compiled them and he kind of won. That was the first record.
I think it is, as a result, lyrically and topically, it's all over the shop because this is a first record.
It's very varied.
He sounds that he's most limited as a vocalist, as a lyricist, and as a thinker on this record. Some of that's actually quite charming. Some of the songs,
it doesn't need to all be like, here's the message, you know what I mean?
Yeah, some of the songs have got that really lovely, which is the thing that I quite like, that kind of lovely lo-fi indie early 2000s hip hop feel, which I find really charming and quite endearing. from elect creation and destruction.
But until then, I had alien women suck me off. When God said that there be light, I turned it the fuck off. And that's the reason Earth is only 5 billion years old. I made the sun shine and permitted time to unfold. The surface was lava. When I stepped down, it became cold. Fuck what you've been told.
There's an urgency to his flow there, and the beat has got that old school feel I was talking about. Positive Balance is a really good pure hip hop song.
I propelled to pole position, ahead of the pack, light years ahead of the whack. I give a fiend a good book instead of the crack. That's the gold mine. Negativity can't hold mine. The black bear's headed for the gold line, and then I'm positive at showtime.
It's a bit of braggadocio, of course it is. He's ragging on the music industry. There's a bit of clever wordplay in it, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh yeah, cool, I can get behind this. If this is the guy, I'm behind this guy, right? I could probably like that guy. Dance with the Devil is the first half of that song. The actual narrative piece of it is a tremendous piece of work.
I once knew a nigga whose real name was William. His primary concern was making $1 million, being the illest hustler that the world ever seen. He used to fuck movie stars and sniff coke in his dreams. A corrupted young mind at the age of 13.
It's fucking unreal. That was the first thing I ever heard.
That's the thing I think's the real standout. It's 10 minutes, isn't it?
Because it's two stories. It's got a hidden track. They called it a hidden track.
It's called the Prophecy, innit?
Yeah,
the Prophecy.
The second half with Diabolic in it, I think, is less impressive.
No, that shit, I don't even consider that, but yeah. No.
So you know that this apparently came from a true story that he learned in jail.
Yep.
Because there was a lot of patter about, this was a gang thing, this was made up, blah blah. No, he said a few times, no, it was a story that was going about the jail. Apparently it is based in reality, but it was a sort of thing that he brought out with him. The initiation about Billy, who ends up raping his own mum in the song.
Along with his new brothers, cocked the gat to a head and pulled back the shirt cover. But what he saw made him start to cringe and stutter, cause he was staring into the eyes of his own mother. She looked back at him and cried cause he had forsaken her. She cried more painfully, and when they were raping her, his whole world... That
punch, because that was the first thing I ever heard. And I remember when I heard that, I was like, fucking hell, you know what I mean?
It's like fucking heavy.
I don't think I've ever been slammed in the gut that hard listening to it, you know, like lyrically.
Yep.
But it's like, fucking what? Because it was like, fucking, I must have listened to it about 4 times in a truck. I mean, he's a really, really good storyteller, and I wish that's one thing I wish he had done more of.
Yeah,
more of that
totally
type of stuff, the storytelling stuff, because he's so fucking good at it, man. Do you know what I mean?
He's fucking got into footed with that one. I mean, for the benefit of the listener, it's a gang initiation where the gang sort of, it's a narrative about this young character Billy, and Billy is to get initiated into this gang. They sort of force him to rape, and then it turns out he doesn't know because he can't see the person, and it's his mum, and it's the gang playing a prank on him, and
it's the build-up's fucking unbelievable, and it's got the Mobb Deep sample in it as well. You know, the Falling and I Can't Turn Back. That's Prodigy that said that. So I mean, I wish he maybe just did a bit more of that. He kind of touches on it in Revolutionary 2 with the song, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's later on I think it's like second last song, we said about the girl that dies of AIDS.
You never know.
That's the same sort of vibe, but it's an actual story and a narrative, and there's the punchline at the end. It's similar to in structure to Dance with the Devil in that respect, where something comes out the blue at the end, you're like, fucking hell.
Yeah.
But it's a wee bit disappointing that he didn't really do more of that. Do you know what I mean? Because I think he was fucking very, very, very good at that kind of shit, man.
Yeah, for me, that's when he most comes to life as a rapper.
Yeah, me as well. I would agree.
Like the politics stuff, I can kind of take or leave at this age. I probably would have loved some of the politics stuff back at the time as well. Although I would never have been able to get on board with any conspiracy nonsense that he tends to lean towards quite heavily in places. But no, that song's good, and it just has that like mournful feel. Yeah, it works. That song works really well for me, and I agree with you. I think you should have done more of that. The other song that I wanted to point out was the Illest. Just not because the song's totally fine, right? But it is what it is.
The Illest?
Yeah, the Illest.
I burn my bridges with a blowtorch. A rebel born from verbal holocaust. Dirty and never try to cleanse to get the drama off. Swift as stealth assassin, snipe you from balcony shots. A terrorist position, professional from the opera box.
But I want to talk about Jean Grey for a wee second, who's on that song with him. Do you guys know much about Jean Grey?
No,
I know the name, but
just from X-Men.
So yeah, that's exactly where she got the name from. So one of the things that he does a lot, that a lot of people in that era who are a certain kind of hip hop artist, is homophobia, right?
Aye.
It comes up, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do think his feelings on that and the way that he uses that language, that horrible language that he often uses, does evolve over his course of his career. There's a lot less of it in the third world, for example. I've
seen an interview when he actually addresses it. He says, I regret saying some of that shit. And this was like no long after he did it. You know, I'm talking like maybe 5 years after. It's not like he was doing it now where everybody jumps on his stuff and they'd be like, apologise for the shit. So he was quite quick to actually kind of come round to that and go, like, I used a lot of words when he did Dance to the Devil live later on. He changed a lot of the words, like when he uses the word bitch, he changes it. He doesn't say bitch, and he you know. So I mean, again, grown.
There's a lot of context in it as well. Maybe I'll talk about it in a couple of the tracks, but there's a lot of F-bombs in it, but they're used in different ways. And I think whether we like it or not, that does matter. But he's guilty of both.
Yeah. So the reason I bring up Jean Grey in this context is Jean Grey is a transgender queer artist. And she actually retired from hip hop in 2008 and has been working freelance as a lyric writer and written a book and all that. And she still occasionally gets behind the mic. But it's like, this is his first record, and it's really interesting to be bringing somebody like that on. I don't know if she was trans back then, but it's just really weird that they're using that language and there's somebody like that in the immediate circle that he's aware of. But it's led me down this little rabbit hole. There was actually a really cool study done by a guy called Matt Daniels, which looked into which rappers had the widest vocabulary. Right. Maybe up to 200 rappers that you analysed, including all the Wu-Tang Clan and stuff like that.
Oh, they came low, man. I mean, I like the Wu-Tang.
Well, they actually came in the top 10, teamed together.
I'm going to guess that Rakim's right at the top.
No.
Is he
Aesop Rock by a good long way.
Really? Was Rakim high up in it though? Because
Rakim is in it, yeah.
He's held pretty high in that respect.
But so essentially, what it was is he just wanted to figure out like who had the biggest vocabulary, and the way that he kind of done the analysis was it was the first 35,000 words that these people had done, which is like between 3 and 5 albums. There's some rappers that he couldn't add, like for example LP at the time hadn't done enough records, or hadn't done enough rapping on records,
right, to justify
even though he's a good rapper, so he could never make it in the list. Jean Grey's in the same bracket as Immortal Technique, which is basically in the top 25%. But there's only 6 rappers that are higher, this kind of third tier which they're on. So yeah, Immortal Technique and Jean Grey are alongside Del the Funky Homo Sapien, The Roots, RZA, Ghostface Killer, and a few others.
Ghostface Killer?
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have thought RZA, I wouldn't have thought Ghostface Killer, there you go.
But in the top 2, basically, are Wu-Tang Clan as a unit, GZA.
GZA,
MF Doom.
Aye.
Jedi Mind Tricks.
That's Vinny Paz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's an interesting character for sure.
He's weird now, man, because he started off as quite a conscious rapper and then kind of got a bit ignorant. It's almost like he went the fucking opposite way. Do you know what I mean?
The bird flu is a lie, the swine flu is a lie. Why would that even come as a surprise? Yeah, the polio vaccine made you die. It caused cancer and it cost a lot of people their lives. Do y'all know about Bohemian Grove? How the world leaders sacrificing children in robes?
Quite a great deal of anti-Semitism in his later stuff, for sure.
Weird.
The top 2 were Bus Driver, who had used 7,324 different words over the course.
Did he use the word perspicacious?
He may have done.
Because Immortal Technique dropped that in an interview and I had to fucking go and look it up and I was like, that's so fucking showy.
Yeah. And then Aesop Rock was number 1. It was so far ahead of everyone else. It was over 7,800 unique words to use within the first 35 albums of his career.
Put one up for shackle me, not clean logic procreation. I did not invent the wheel, I was the crooked spoke adjacent. While the 666ers lassos keep angels roped in the basement. I walk the block with a halo and a stick, poking your patience. Y'all catch a 30-second flash visual. Dirty cooperative net platoon plume.
And as a total word nerd, I fucking love that shit. But it's just really interesting because I actually feel as though that Immortal Technique is quite vocabulary limited. But I guess the stats don't fucking lie. You know what I mean? They just don't. Aye. They just don't lie, clearly. And in the top 4 brackets, there are no rappers from the 2010s in it at all.
There's no fucking real surprise there, aye.
But most of them are clustered around the middle, around about the 2,500, 3,500 word range. Most rappers are kind of in there. But yeah, interesting that Immortal Technique and Jean Grey make it into that list. When I didn't think that he could, but he does. So there we go. But no, that led me down a rabbit hole. But the Jean Grey thing was the thing that made me go, that's dead interesting. Like knowing a gay person, being friendly with them, and then being able to, be casually homophobic in songs is.
There is absolutely no fucking excuse for using that type of language, right? But I'm trying to look at it from a point of view where I grew up, right? people would say shit like that. And listen, man, I'm not going to sit here and say that I've never used those words, right? Like, because I'd be a fucking hypocrite if I was going to pull Immortal Technique up. If I came from Govan, right? Was there any real actual thought of me projecting a slur at an actual gay person? No. It was just where I grew up. That was the words you used, but with no actual real thought to what it actually means to use the word. It was just a word that you used.
Well, that's what, when I said about the two contexts, he does that on a few of these the F-bombs a couple of times. In some cases you can tell it's just a generic insult.
Exactly.
So it's kind of almost used in the same way as bitch or something like that.
Exactly.
Which I'm not saying that's it's not insensitive.
It is insensitive.
But there are other occasions. I think he uses the phrase "degenerate fags" in one song, which is without a doubt completely over the line.
He's actually using it in the context of the way it is used properly to insult somebody. Do you know what I mean? It's just there's never a cool time to use those type of words ever. But coming from a rough background, you know, in a rough area and stuff like that, you want to look at somebody and going to a gay person and calling them gay. It was just a word to use. And in hindsight now, it was the wrong word to use, but there was no actual real fucking venom towards gay people behind it, although it's still fucked up to say it.
Well, the thing is, you probably were sometimes, and it probably made them scared to be open about that. You know, that I guess all of us, not just you, I mean like the royal you, like shouting the kind of insults, even as kids, even if they weren't actually entirely focused on what the word meant. Invariably, you would actually, believe it or not, be hitting somebody like that. Did apply to
100%.
And maybe driving them back further into the closet. So, you know,
I'm saying now that it's like I can't sit here and say I'm captain, you know, like, oh, I've never said anything wrong ever in my life. I have, you know what I mean? Like, there is points in my life, but you've got to grow as an individual and realise that that is not a fucking word you'd be just throwing about casually, right? That's
kind of where the rubber meets the road in terms of social-political philosophy versus the reality. There is a point where you have to not just be abstracting people's rhetoric and using it and weaponising it against them. However, even in the most idle use of that word, I think it's just important to remember it's not a victimless crime. You know, there are people that, even if you're using it in a sense that has absolutely 100%. Nothing to do with somebody's sexuality, people who overhear that, people that are of that sexuality, feel further marginalised. And
100%, and I totally agree with that.
And he's, you know, he has to own that.
No, 100%. I'm not justifying why he's been saying these things.
I don't know if he has. I'll be honest. I mean, we'll maybe get to it. There's another quote by him that I find a wee bit hard to swallow.
Was it this idea I was going to say? So is it this idea that, and it's not just him that said this, but a lot of other rappers who've used those words in the past is kind of mostly around ideas. So we would just say that because that was somebody that was weak. So that was just the parlance we'd use for that. It's not necessarily homophobic. It's just
you know, exactly.
Which again, I'm not really sure I'm fully buying that, given some of the ways that it's deployed in some of the songs.
Totally.
But yeah, I think he uses it a lot less, and it's kind of. I imagine if the Middle Passage ever comes out, it's probably not going to be on it.
So you've mentioned that a couple of times. Middle Passage was about 2006ish, and it's unreleased and kind of shrouded in mystery. This record,
So the idea was they recorded the Middle Passage alongside the Third World. They were being recorded at the same time. They were going to come out quite close to each other, and now it's become his Chinese democracy.
Yeah, it's been
20 years, man.
Like all the boards are full of like, I heard it's coming out. He said it would maybe be his magnum opus, the last thing he'd ever release. Somebody on YouTube put together their best guess that was based on some stuff that got leaked, some rarities and things that came out from the time. So you can have a listen. It's got on that playlist, they've got that 2005 single Bin Laden.
Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knock down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knock down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga. Bin Laden didn't blow up the projects. It was you, nigga. Tell the truth, nigga. Bush knock down the tower. Tell the truth, nigga.
Which is the chorus line, Bush knocked down the towers.
Is that, there's a version of that that's got a verse for Eminem on it?
Is there?
I'm pretty sure, aye.
It's also got a line, fuck Schwarzenegger, his pop was a Nazi.
Is that true?
It is true, but I mean, nobody's more critical of that than Schwarzenegger himself, who's very much come out and owned that and said how ashamed he is of his dad's.
100%, aye. I mean, this is true.
I was going to say that on the Middle Passage briefly there, he toured in 2019 and he did songs for it live and all that.
I was there. I was there at the garage.
I heard he was asking folk to comment online about how good the record is, the songs they'd heard,
and they did.
And they did.
I read it.
I don't remember that.
And I think for him, it was like if you go out and then ask for it, then maybe I'll actually get my arse in gear, and then it's never happened. And then I think more recently he's like, well, when COVID happened, and then I'm just keep working on it here and there. But he's
an egotistical move, that, innit? If you tell me you like my songs or release an album, just release a fucking album. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that gig was interesting, man, because it was like a fight nearly broke out at it. And it's one of the only gigs other than your hardcore gigs where you get people scuffle. But fair play to him. He was performing and there was a guy pushed a girl in the front, and fair play, he stopped the entire set and he was like, you either get him out of here or I'm going to fucking get him out. And they dragged him out. So I was like, fair enough. And he was like, Lassie, you alright? And the lassie like, hey, she was cheering and that. She's like, okay, no bother, and started the set again. So
he said he never played a show in Chicago where someone didn't get stabbed.
Wow.
Aye.
Right,
no good.
Music.
Aye,
Third World. 2008.
This is an invasion, an occupation, Immortal Technique, the evil genius DJ Green Lantern, and you're now in a state of guerrilla warfare.
So in this record, a few things happen. There's a leap forward in his vocal ability. I think he actually went away and learned how to control his breath more, so his voice is better, it's fuller, he sounds like
rougher.
Yeah.
Gruffer.
It's a total step forward in his style. It's artistically a lot further ahead, but again, there's still some of this conspiracy theory stuff across the record. This album's got a quite clear thematic thrust, which is about how the first world exploit the third world, which is the whole
this is the album that he used the profits from it to help fund that orphanage.
He did, yeah.
Supposedly he went out there as well to try and show Afghans that Americans were not what they probably thought they were based on their current interaction with them.
There is some footage yet, but I don't know if it's still there, but there is a wee bit of footage yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, Harlem Renaissance is a song about the gentrification of Harlem, which is very of the era sonically.
District rated, designated ghetto like the Yellow Star of David, and you wonder why people don't own their homes. Cause the racist bank wouldn't fucking mortgage a loan. Harlem once was red line district rated, designated ghetto like the Yellow Star of David, and you wonder why.
Production and the beats are very late 2000s. This record loses the charm of the first two records. It's not got that gritty kind of lo-fi.
I was going to say that I don't like this musically. I don't like this as much. Actually, no, you pointed out his vocal style's different. I actually preferred his old vocal style where it was a bit more cleaner and it cut through. They developed more of that gruffer kind of thing, and it felt a wee bit forced, but that's just my taste, really.
And Mistakes has got like a 90s feel to it, samples and beat, which kind of brought me really into that song. But yeah, I didn't really find a lot to love on that record at all.
Nah, that was the same. I kind of checked out of that.
It's significant. If you look and rate your music and all that, it got a very low score compared to his other records as well, which is interesting. I did a mixtape in 2011 called The Martyr,
it's a kind of previously unreleased and some new material compilation thing that was for free.
I liked the song Civil War in that. I thought that was a class
song. That's a good tune,
Brother Ali, who I've got a lot of time for. I really like him.
In the South, it's between field niggas and slaves that are stuck in the house.
Civil war for the soul of a nation. This is a struggle to save civilization. Demonstrations overthrowing the occupation. The annihilation of mental colonization.
Chuck D does the hook pretty good, and then you've got Killer Mike on it as well. He's actually he's the weakest link in that song by a significant margin.
He's a bit.
Yeah, it's a good, really, really good song, and I'd recommend checking that one out.
So, Revolutionary Volume 2 in a wee bit of detail. Fucking hip hop records, by the way, of this era are too long. Sorry, 67
Most hip hop records in general are just too long.
Well, get the skits to fuck. Just get to the songs.
Yeah.
Well, this starts with a skit, kind of intro. Mimia Abu Jamal.
Yep.
You're listening to Immortal Technique, and this is Revolutionary Volume 2, bringing you the truth in the form of hip-hop. From Death Row, this is Mumia Abu Jamal.
Perhaps the world's best known death row inmate, according to the New York Times in 2001. I'm sure you remember Rage Against the Machine going on about him, but did you know that Man is the Bastard also had him on as a tune? Anti-Flag had him on a tune. 25 cities have made him an honorary citizen, and Paris has a little street named after him. If you're not familiar with the case, it's actually worth reading about. In 2011, his death sentence was overturned and he was given life in prison instead. The facts of the case are like, oh, is that what all the fuss is about? But it does seem that there's a fair bit of malfeasance on the part of the authorities in terms of trying to nail their guy.
Aye.
So you can go and read about it and make up your own mind, really.
It was Move, wasn't it? The group, it was called Move, and it was a bombing in Philadelphia, I believe. Is that about right?
That he got sent to jail for?
Yeah.
No, he got sent to jail for shooting a policeman in the face.
Oh.
Killing him. His brother got stopped by a cop. He was in a taxi. He pulled over and ran across to supposedly try and break up the argument, and the cop got shot twice, once in the face. Jamal had a pistol and a pistol holster. The pistol had, it seemed like it had been fired 5 times. Witnesses said it was him, but then various bits and bobs of the witness statements and stuff seemed like they'd been tampered with by the police, and it seemed like the police had sort of leaned on people to try and make this nice and open and shut. As to whether or not that says he didn't do it,
who knows? You
can go make your own mind up, but it does seem that the authorities were also quite fast and loose with their procedures. So, yeah.
Interesting.
Second one, though, is the first track, Properly, Point of No Return.
I'd rather shoot it out and get clapped. I've gone too far, there ain't no coming back for me. Auschwitz gas chamber full of Zyklon B. Just like the Spanish exterminating Tainos, raping the black and Indian women, creating Latinos. Motherfuckers made me out of self-righteous hatred.
Here's my big bit. The production in this is a step up. There you go, that's my musical observation. You get a wee shout out to Elijah Muhammad in this. We throw back to the Arnold Michaelis pod, and this is the one with that genetic engineered sickness spread among me.
It's got a really strong flow. It's got
a strong flow as well.
Yes,
I say that he's from Peru. Actually,
early 2000s synth sound is very much of the era. I like that though. Big fan of that stuff. That thing. The song's got a pretty strong hook actually. It does echo like Public Enemy or Chuck D in places.
Get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return. And if I back down now, then forever I burn. This is the point from which I can never retreat. Cause if I turn back now, there can never be peace. This is the point from which I will die.
But yeah, when he starts talking about how the government's out to kill him and all that, which he said a few times, he's actually said that he thinks the government might kill him after he releases the Middle Passage.
I think he's blowing smoke up his own arse.
I don't
really think
delusions of grandeur.
He's that important, but that could be the hip hop hype thing. Do you know what I mean?
Basically, what he's doing there is setting the scene for if he dies of something else that his catalogue will sell, and he'll be a martyr. And he's got that fucking record, The Martyr.
Yeah, he does.
A little bit of like legacy building. I mean, he's a, as I said, I think there's a lot of feathering of his own reputation across his career.
Without a doubt.
I think that's a good song. I think that's a good song, probably one of the better ones on the record. Joe, do you want to give us your highlights?
I've got a couple written down here. So Harlem Streets, I think's really good again.
A good song.
Can I just say, it's like Cambodia, the killing fields uptown. No, it fucking isn't, mate. Although this does have a great line in it. You better off rich and guilty than poor and innocent. That's a really good little bit.
Harlem streets stay flooded in white powder, like those motherfuckers running away from the Twin Towers. Gunshots rock the earth like a meteor shower. Bowling for Columbine fair, giving the media power. Innocence devoured like a chicken spot snack box. Government cocaine.
Again, I'm not going line by line here and then scrutinising everything. I'm just saying, like in general terms, I think the lyrical content's on point with that. You know what I mean? About the flooding the fucking streets. Especially
that's true as well.
I think that one's actually pretty decent. I just that Cambodia killing fields.
Again, he's using extreme imagery to kind of paint a picture. Do you know what I mean? Whether he believes, you know what I mean? Does he think that? Really, probably no. But it sounds cool. Do you know what I mean? So there is. You've got to remember, there's a lot of hip hop. They will use extreme things that you'll be like, what the fuck? That's nothing like it would be there. But it's just about painting the picture. Do you know what I mean? That is what it is. Good tune, I thought. The Fourth Branch, I thought was a good tune as well.
I break it down with critical language and spiritual anguish. The Judas I hang with, the guilt of betraying Christ, who murdered him, stole his religion, and painted him white. Translated in psychologically tainted philosophy, conservative political right-wing ideology.
Did quite like that one. The guitar sample gives me a kind of feeling of lament, but ultimately, man, because it's a 9/11 Truther song, I was like, that's a bit too conspiratorial for me, to be honest.
I'll put the cards on the table. I'm just listening to it because I actually like the fucking tune.
It's a good tune. I think it is a good hip hop song,
and I kind of treat some of this stuff like a film, right? So like the storytelling in it. I think that the story he's telling is 100% accurate. Do I agree with it? No, but I like it in the context of the song. But I do agree, if you're going to set your fucking stall out there, is this fucking revolutionary aye, it's kind of irresponsible putting some of these things out there, do you know what I mean? So I get that, but do I like the beat and the way he flows on it? Aye,
I just think it kind of undermines the salient points that he does make. So
it does. Aye, that's what I'm saying. He weakens his strong points by putting in shite that makes it kind of just takes all his kind of credibility, for want of a better word, out of it completely. Do you know what I mean? He does that quite a lot.
It was actually when I got to this point of the record that like the kind of the key point for me started to make myself clear, and I think I messaged you about it at the time. Is like he's really good at weaving the narrative together, and I think one thing which is in his favour, and it's probably why so many people like him, is he is actually quite a compelling artist. He's got a lot of musicality. He seems to have a really good way of like creating a sonic space for his particularly extreme lyrics that kind of work in a way that's not super obvious and super hip hoppy, you know. It's still obviously quite hip hoppy, or I've seen this called hardcore hip hop because it is quite extreme.
Reality hip hop actually gets flung about a lot. Aye,
but he is quite a compelling figure, I think, as an MC.
He's charismatic. His flow is good. He's got good delivery. For me, that was the thing that attracts, you know, like you were talking back to the whole thing about you like the kind of indie hip hop stuff, like it's more stripped down beats and stuff like that. I'm very much like that as well. Most of the hip hop I like, it's more about the lyricist and the way he flows rather than the actual big beat. One thing I hate about hip hop is when the beat is drowning out the vocalist. That instantly turns me off because I want to hear the guy's voice and his delivery and, you know, how he tackles shit and all that, because being in the band, I'm a big rhythm guy, so I like rhythms and playing with rhythms and words, you know, the kind of clever way that he'll rhyme words and stuff like that, and at odd places. So there's that technical side of it that I like. I'm talking about technical because I hate technical death metal, but when dealing with hip hop, I like technical rapping. A lot of the reason I like him is because I like that part of him. Do you know, it's not just what he's saying, it's kind of how he's saying it. Do you know what I mean? And the conviction that he uses and his delivery and that.
Yeah. What other highlights you got?
Internally Bleeding I thought was really cool. It's kind of get this kind of weird, I don't know if it's a guitar or a sample, a kind of keyboard sample, but it's odd.
Hey yo, the things I seen in life will make you choke by surprise, like an aborted fetus in a jar that opened its eyes, provoking my demise and leave your spirit broken inside, like the feeling of 50 million people hoping you die, and niggas wonder why my heart is full of
provocative track.
Aye,
bit of a coat hanger abortion shit.
Aye, that's right.
It's got a couple of particularly good lines. And my mother told me that placing my faith in God was the answer, but then I hated God because he gave my mother cancer.
Aye.
I mean, sorry to come across as a total fucking newbie here, but
you are.
Is his flow not quite Eminem in this track?
Your children are holding, internally bleeding, cold-blooded, stripped of emotion. I go through the motions, but there's no life in my eyes. It's like I'm hooked up to a respirator, waiting to die. Hooked up to the fucking chair, waiting to fry. Soothing electric.
I think sometimes for me, it does sound a bit like Eminem across the first two records. Personally, I think that.
Okay, so? Good. Mm-hmm. This was the only one where it really jumped out. I was like, I feel like I recognise.
A few reviews talk about that as well.
Did they?
Yeah, they seem to a lot of summer reviews, and some particularly if you go and rate your music, people are like, yeah, I mean, it sounds like he's trying to be Eminem. I don't think I'd go that far, but no. I think there's a similarity.
I think he's better. I think he's would I say he's better? Again, there's too many different ways that you judge an MC for me, right? You've got the lyrical content, their flow, and their voice, right? Do I prefer listening to him to Eminem? Aye. But if you're talking about getting into the technical, the way Eminem uses words and the way he structures his flow and all that, probably he's a more technical rapper than like say Immortal Technique. But maybe I never really noticed, I'll be honest. And I actually liked the couple of the early Eminem records, like the Marshall Mathers record when it came out. I actually kind of liked it. I mean, go back now, you're listening, you go, for fuck's sake, do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
But I mean, listen, man, I'm not going to be like sitting here going, oh, I don't. If it comes on and it's a decent tune, I'm still going to nod my head to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was actually Eminem that got me into hip hop. And then I bounced right off it quite quickly when I started finding things like Sage Francis and all that. I was always a wee bit like, he's heavy in the homophobia on the first two records. Even back then, I was a bit like, that's a bit much, mate.
Oh, fuck, aye. I mean, aye.
You're right, he is a technically good artist. You know, he's a very, very, very technically good, like,
the way he is a wordsmith, do you know what I mean? But another one was Cause of Death. I thought that was a pretty good track as well.
You better watch what the fuck flies out of your mouth, or I'ma hijack a plane and fly it into your house. Burn your apartment with your family tied to the couch and slit your throat so when you scream, only blood comes out. I doubt that there could ever be
I thought that track was a good track, but right from the start there's a lot of conspiracy theory stuff.
Again, right? I get it.
But what it kind of made me realise...
The United States sponsored the rise of the Third Reich. Give me a fucking break, honestly. How old are you?
But at this point, I had like a whole vision in my head. I was like, I realised that if all the things that he says are true, then that's a really exhausting way to live your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's always going to be that thing where people who are like conspiracy theories of like, I've got the secret, we've spoken about it earlier on in another podcast, I've got the secret knowledge and everybody else doesn't agree with me as a dummy. But there's also like so much paranoia. Metric tons of paranoia, and as much as I did like that song, and he goes very heavy, and then I was like, man, it must be really exhausting just to exist in this world,
to be that to be that para.
Yeah,
this is the reason I'm so hyper focused on it, because I can't give a pure appraisal of this music because I can't ignore it. It's just too intrusive in my personal thinking when I hear somebody saying shit like that, that line about the United States sponsored the rise of the Third Reich. Like, honestly, mate, fucking get a grip of yourself. Like, that is so fucking puerile.
Listen, man, you guys are obviously a lot more versed in that type of shit than me, so I'm just listening to it as it's like almost like story.
But again, it undermines it, because
it does undermine. If you know your politics, and I 100%, I can totally get why that would fucking put somebody right off it.
It clearly undermines it in the mind of a lot of fans as well, because again, I spent so much time reading through different boards of people who are really invested, and they were like, man, I just wish he'd shut the fuck up about that stuff, because I really like what he does. But he's a joke when he starts talking about that stupid. And they were actually talking about the phenomenon of kind of post-truth hip-hop. They were like saying it's just such a plague on the scene right now, that there's all these talented guys who just talk so much fucking bullshit.
Well, that's a good point, man. Because that's what it goes back to him as an MC. He's extremely good, but sometimes the subject matters, like you're saying, it's fucking him up, because he could be rapping about so much other fucking more poignant stuff that would be cool. Again, maybe just go down the story route, you know, doing stories and shit like that. It'd be fucking phenomenal.
He could be saying lines like send a dead fetus to my ex on Valentine's Day.
Which is quite a funny line.
I mean, it's dark as fuck, but it's quite.
Listen, man, another one more song, and I used to probably hate it, but I like ignorant hip hop is obnoxious. I thought because
I mean
it's ignorant as fuck, but it makes me laugh every time I hear it.
Yelling Viva Fidel, jerking off with the sheets when I stay at hotels, drinking Bacardi at AA meetings, smoking the L. I'm broke as hell, my attitude is no good, like working for white people after watching Rosewood. So I'm a mercenary, I don't care.
So I've got quite a lot in this song, actually. So
can I just say, I felt very seen in the song. There's a line that goes, "How dare you criticise the way that I spit, you coffee shop revolutionary son of a bitch." I think that's absolutely me.
Okay, gold line.
This song is part of the very wide tradition of non-serious songs on hip hop.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just dissing for the sake of dissing.
I remember when we did a record, I think it was maybe the Non-Profits record, and you were like, I just kind of getting bored with the humour, or Lil Kim, and that was Lil Kim, because she's got a lot of songs that are quite funny. You're like, I just kind of getting bored with the humour. You know, like, I don't understand why that's there. I feel like I'm listening to comedy sometimes. I don't like comedy music. And then what I said back then is, like, if you're telling stories of like really grim shit, it's sometimes quite useful to offload some of the extreme like grimness of the record. Obnoxious totally does that, and yeah, like the beat of it's cool. There's kind of cabaret samples on it, which is a really smart thing.
You choke on your gimmick. Niggas said hip hop was dead, but I'm invoking the spirit. We taking it back in the day to the golden age when whack motherfuckers used to get thrown off stage. Immortal Technique, I made this the bump on your ride or burn it off the internet.
The wee vocal hook's called the dum dum dum. That's very Eminem.
Yeah,
but it's ignorant shit. But
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of homophobia on it. So, you know what I mean?
It's ignorant as fuck. But I kind of like the kind of daftness of it.
I think the interesting case study of the homophobia, the Industrial Revolution, is another one that's mainly about music industry sort of critique, albeit a bit more personal. And he does drop an F-bomb in that one, but as I said, the context is not really sexuality. It's more of just a diss word. But Crossing the Boundary, the 8th track, is different.
I never make songs to disrespect women or to judge people about the way that they living, but the way I am is based on the life I was given, like them white boys losing my religion. I used to be a Christian and a political pawn.
First of all, he starts that with I never make songs that disrespect women. So I think maybe we should let women decide, because there's a line in it, I'll rape your mum so we can make this a personal issue.
Is that not funny?
I never make songs that disrespect women.
I know.
Is he trying to be ironic though? Is it the same song? I can't remember.
I'm not entirely sure. It's trying to be ironic. The big line one that stood out for me in that one is a bit about Timothy McVeigh, where he talks about reality is making us strong like the ghost of Timothy McVeigh making a bomb. There's an anti-authority bent there, but to be clear, Timothy McVeigh killed 168 people, including 19 little kids when he blew up the FBI building. He's a fucking dogshit human being. And a lot of people, like your Alex Jones, they court a lot of that kind of shit as well. So I don't know how sincere he is, but I don't think it comes across, and that's probably misjudged on his part, or it's very, very wrong. The second one, though, is the big line 2, Immortal Technique, incinerate degenerate fags. That, to me, you're not really sort of wiggling out of that one, and it's just a diss. That sounds like something a lot darker.
Yeah, it kind of crosses the line.
As soon as you put degenerate and then that word in, and aye, exactly, aye.
I've got a couple of highlights just to pull out. Leaving the Past has got quite a good guitar sample on it.
Nourishment, but people don't believe it. I guess it's hard to stomach the truth like a bulimic. It's a dirty game and nobody is willing to clean it. But this is for the paraplegic people dreaming and running. Ladies married to men who don't please them, dreaming of coming. Verbally murderous like David Berkowitz when I'm gunning.
Aye.
I like him when he's in the chill mode vocally.
It works really well, aye.
But I actually was kind of blown away about how wild the lexicon of his conspiracy theories are, because he talks about the TWA Flight 800 conspiracy.
Yeah, he does.
Which I was like, that's a deep cut, man. That's a deep cut. Apparently at the time, like when that happened, like over half of Americans believed it was blown up by the FBI. Like it was like widely like accepted, quote unquote accepted conspiracy theory amongst the general public in America. That's reaching deep into the bag of tricks there, isn't it?
He's a paranoid guy.
And then the final one was you brought it up earlier on, is You Never Know.
Was on her way to becoming a college graduate. Wouldn't even stop to talk to the average kid. The type of Latina I'd sit and contemplate marriage with. Fuck the horse and carriage shit.
We've said it, we've agreed. I like it when he goes into storytelling mode. It actually is what makes him a very compelling rapper for me.
Yep,
it's probably the best song on the record.
It's probably the best song because he just paints a really interesting story. His flow is good. Does he drop any stupid fucking, daft patter about fucking uninformed fucking shit? No conspiracy theory, just a story, and it's fucking bang on and very laid back sort of beat as well. It flows really nice, and it's got a real, again, come back to the Dance for the Devil, it's got that punch in the fucking gut at the end when you find out the lassie's actually get AIDS. Which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
No cool that she's get AIDS, but
oh, jeez, that's a fucking dark clip waiting to happen there.
Really cool that she's get AIDS.
Just cut it right
there. Aye, do that, mate.
That's it. Is that 4 seconds on there?
Go for it, mate. I don't care, man. I'll share it.
I mean, my thoughts. Weirdly, I think this is an album of born of privilege. Hear me out. He lives in a society, in a country where he can make those sorts of allegations, and he's allowed to, completely, basically free of reprisals. And I know he complains about people trying to silence him, but the fact is that he enjoys the freedom to make insinuations, allegations, and frankly, extremely untrue statements. He can shit in his own country to his heart's content. There are no actual repercussions. In fact, he seems to have done fairly well out of it. I wonder if he realised. I wonder if he'll ever release a record that muses on the irony of that. Let's say that, try writing actual protest music that comes with actual danger, in Russia or China or indeed even in Israel right now. I'm sure he can bring himself to criticise Israel, but countries where writing these kind of things does actually have a price for doing it, and there is a place for all of this. That's the thing. Like, as part of a healthy democracy, as part of a healthy information economy where everybody can put their 2 cents in and stuff, right?
A marketplace of ideas.
Marketplace of ideas to some extent. But the post-truth world and the places that he is strayed, I would say those are increasingly not part of a healthy conversation. To be critical of the government, to raise questions about things, to imply cynical motivations for certain things is absolutely acceptable and probably good that it's there, so
it's good for democracy.
It's good for just critical thinking.
Something the left has always been good at as
Post-truth politics is not. Post-truth politics is something completely different, where nothing is true. You're ruining the notion of objective fact, and you're just poisoning the information supply. I think.
Where does this fall then? Because this was obviously before post-truth politics was even.
Well, it wasn't before. It was before it was identified. But InfoWars and all that stuff. That whole phenomenon was already underway, and I think it was trending in that direction. That book, you know, the Clinton conspiracy, for example, is a perfect example of that. So seals of approval from the likes of Alex Jones and the Tate brothers, those should set off big fucking alarms for the guy. He has done a lot of good in the world, and he has spoken a lot of truth in the world, but in many other ways I think he's also part of the problem.
I've also got a take. So I really wanted to like this record because Immortal Technique has always kind of existed on the periphery of my hip hop kind of knowledge. He never really crossed over with a lot of the artists that I like. Brother Ali probably being the only exception. He's never really crossed over with like Rhyme Sales guys or Sage Francis or that kind of thing. But he's often held up in certain circles as a great rapper and a really strong lyricist. I don't think he's a great rapper, and he's definitely not the strongest lyricist. I think he's good. So I would say that those claims are maybe a little bit overstated. My own taste in hip-hop kind of leans towards artists who tell compelling stories and use really clever wordplay, and he's definitely capable of both of those things. But I think sometimes, particularly on the early record, the first record, his flow feels really generic, and it does sound like Eminem in places for me. And I do think, in my view, Eminem is a better, you said it as well, he's a better lyricist, a better wordplay and stuff like that. Immortal Technique is kind of compelling as an artist, I think. You know, he's clearly got a lot of musicality to the way that he creates his songs, and I like that. The bit that's a bit confusing, that might be confusing when I say this, is like when he does hit gold, like I noted in the highlights, he is quite compelling. There are elements of, like you've said as well, Chris, like his worldview that I agree with, US imperialism and foreign policy have undeniably caused destruction all around the world. He's absolutely right to highlight institutional racism, class struggle, and the brutal realities of capitalism. I think it's fair and even healthy to critique government structures and institutions, especially given their histories of abuse, corruption, and exploitation, and particularly in marginalised communities of colour. But that's also kind of the soil that a lot of his radical ideas grow from as well. And that's the problem for me. Like, there's legitimate critiques woven into like this dense mishmash of extreme claims and outright untruths, like AIDS being man-made, or 9/11 being an inside job, or TWA Flight 800, like you said. So it creates this kind of cognitive dissonance for me. Like, he's just, when he's building a really powerful point or telling a great story, he'll just derail it with something so extreme or factually wrong that it just yanks me out of it. But I think the key thing for me is that I feel like he's setting up the listener of the record to be the enemy. He moved through the record with the same tone that a lot of conspiracy theorists adopt. As I've said before, as we've said in this podcast earlier, I possess secret knowledge and you're a fool if you don't agree with me.
Yeah.
And he spends a lot of this album and the last one laying out this truth in a really confrontational way that implies that you're an idiot if you don't already see things the way that he does.
Interesting.
And that's a tough sell for me, because sure, there's people who are going to agree with him. They'll nod along and they'll think he's the realest voice out there because he's speaking the truth. But if you're not already in that camp, I find this record a tough hang.
So weirdly, you think there's people that might believe similar things to him, but actually might approach it from more of a trying to convince you or trying to share with you, whereas he's quite abrupt and confrontational and almost like you said, a bit condescending if you don't get it.
Pretty much.
That probably comes from his battle. He's battling.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
That for me, I feel as though like I'm no part of the joke. I don't know this. I'm no part of the story. I'm not really like, I'm in a different world, moving in a different sphere, and you're just trying to tell me all this. Like, it's like a guy sits down next to me in the pub and starts telling me that COVID was created in a lab in China, and I'm like, well, it's not, mate. It's like, but no, I've got all the fucking answers. Sit the fuck down while I tell you them. And you're like, mate, I don't really
just
care.
For the record, it might have been.
It might have been. I mean, there's certainly there are elements within the CIA that have done the research that think there might have been.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't want to jump on the I'm right, you're right.
I mean, that is definitely not the hill to die on when it comes to conspiracy theories, because it's not the craziest one.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really considered his tone in delivering that stuff, because as you say, I just kept getting yanked out by the fact that it was like, oh God, right, okay, another thing.
But when he's good, he's great, right? And he is occasionally, 35-40% of the time, he is great on this record. And I think he's great as a rapper, generally. I prefer other rappers. I think there are other rappers that are better than him, that are cleverer than him, that aren't, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's a dumbass either. He is pretty good at what he does. And like I said, he's got a good musicality too. He's got a good feel. Compared to some of the people that I really like, he probably has a more compelling package in terms of as being an artist. That's quite funny, actually.
Sorry.
Yeah, his package is very compelling.
I bet it is.
Yeah, so that's kind of the way that
degenerate fag.
But like I really wanted to like it, but like I just kept getting pulled out, and I felt as though I was in a constant psychological battle with him, or he was in a constant psychological battle with me. You know what I mean?
I actually have to say though, I really enjoyed the episode because it was a totally different twist. And I mean, just 2 weeks after doing the thing with Arno where we're talking about right-wing conspiracy theories, it was actually really quite enlightening and grounding to then
see the opposite.
Yeah, and I far from hate the guy. Like, I don't hate him at all. Like, there's so many things he does and says that I'm like, fucking good for you, mate. Like I said, half that video about COVID, I was like, thank fuck, someone's actually been sane. Then he goes and talks about the Japanese scientists, and I'm like, oh mate,
you're so close. I think it goes back to your saying. I think he means well, but he's maybe just too fucking focused on this and no focus, you know what I mean? He's no looking at the absolute bigger picture and taking everything into consideration.
Yeah,
I mean,
one of the things I said there is like a lot of his more radical views come from like this very community, like seeing the oppression in his local community, you know what I mean? And he is clearly a community-minded person. He's obviously an activist. He cares deeply about that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, if you take the healthy critique of institutions and then keep going further with it and taking it down the darker rabbit holes, then you can have both, right? You can have the conspiracy theorist and
he's pilled as fuck, man. Yeah. The guy is pilled as fuck. He is old school woke that has crossed into pilled.
I wonder
what the fuck is pilled, man. I'm just an old cunt. I don't get this, mate.
We'll need to give you some homework.
I'm really, really intrigued to hear what the middle passage is like when it comes out.
I don't think it will.
So much time.
I don't think it will either.
Moved. Like, he's not done anything really musically for a long time. I wonder if anything has really changed. You know,
it's an I don't even. I don't want to make this any longer for you for editing, but there's an interesting wee kind of thing to mention about that is he collaborated a lot with a guy called Diabolic. In fact, I think he's on
the Dance of the Dead.
The second half of that, but I've seen footage of him getting interviewed, and he's since then fell out with Immortal Technique heavy style, right? And he was alluding to the fact that the reason that he hasn't dropped another album is because, kind of going back to what you were saying about the whole, like, you know, he's in a country where he can say these things and he'll not really get challenged on it, and there'll be no real consequences. He reckons now, this is what Diabolic's saying, because things are so extreme now, he's actually scared to actually open his fucking mouth and really take a stance on anything because things are completely because he will get fucking checked for it now. Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah,
that is kind of interesting, but there's a caveat to that. Diabolic is a fucking piece of shit. He's in the video I seen him and he just says a bunch of Trump shit and I'm just like, so you're a fucking idiot anyway. But I think there's maybe a wee seed of truth in what he's saying there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That is really interesting, actually.
So it makes sense. Going to go back to kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. But, Mark, I'm just going to say it. I have an epilogue.
Okay, thanks for warning me.
Oh, you know what, guys? Like, this was conspiracy theory month. We've actually been taking some flack as well because we very silently dropped the Nexus part of this show.
We have very
silently that Mark didn't even notice.
No, actually, you know what? I did notice, but I just didn't really care. Sorry, I just didn't really care.
I'm not going to remind them.
Just didn't really care.
Yeah. But when I was doing this, unavoidably I stumbled across something that would have been Nexus gold in an old episode. You remember the Nexus, Joe?
Aye.
A lot of folk like the Nexus, apparently.
Didn't they one for Cryptopsy, did we?
We've not done one this year.
Right.
So anyway, this is a sort of a nod to the Nexus. This would have been a key step in my Nexus, right? So let's talk about a wee conspiracy theory. Felipe was born in Lima in 1978 when Peru was under a military dictatorship. What else happened for Peru in 1978? Well, how Argentina won the 1978 World Cup was one of the biggest talking points in football then, or actually for some people to this day. It included a very, very significant game against Peru that year, right? Argentina won that cup on home soil, and it became like a famous rallying national victory, especially for General Jorge Videla, their military dictator at the time. So I'm just going to call him Videla for quickness. Videla died in jail for crimes against humanity in 2013, actually. Henry Kissinger was even invited to Argentina to watch the World Cup as a personal guest of that guy. In the moments before the game against Peru, the dictator walked into the opposition team's dressing room, apparently with Henry Kissinger. Several Peru players have testified that Kissinger went in, even though Kissinger said he had no recollection of it. But there's pictures together of them in the stadium together. Anyway, the ex-senator George Ledesma was a trade union organiser in Peru, and he claims, right, that the Peruvian government had him and several other left-wingers at the time abducted to Argentina for torture and to be disappeared. You've probably heard the desaparecidos. This was like people that the junta, it happened in Brazil as well, they were just basically flying them out over the ocean and dumping them in the sea to drown, like getting rid of bodies as well. But George Ledesma says that the loss of Peru to Argentina was a secret deal to help Argentina rebrand itself by winning the most important trophy in world sport. Argentina, to get past Peru, to get to the finals, needed to win by at least 4 goals to progress, right? So like a minimum of 4-0, right? But Peru was very, very good at the time. In fact, Scotland in that same World Cup had just beaten Johan Cruyff's Netherlands 3-2. You maybe remember a very famous what's his name, Archie Gemmill goal, where he like skips through everybody and scores like one of the great Scotland goals. Scotland were good. They beat the Netherlands with Johan Cruyff of all people, right? Peru beat Scotland 3-1. So Peru were a good team, right? Peru managed to lose 6-0 to Argentina.
No chance.
In defiance of all expectations at the time. Jose Velasquez was one of Peru's best players. In 2012, he told Channel 4 News that he was surprisingly substituted halfway through the game, despite having been good, because his government had ordered the team to lose.
The fix was in.
And he said, quote, "Were we pressured? Yes, we were pressured. What kind of pressure? Pressure from the government to the managers of the team, and from the managers of the team to the coaches." So I do wonder what Immortal Technique would make, or Alex Jones would make of that. But there you go.
It's a real conspiracy theory.
I can see that happening.
Voila.
Yeah, nice little coda there. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. What's happening next week?
Next week it is. It's not nearby.
Return of David Weaver.
He has risen.
Peace be upon him.
I wish I had the CD nearby to show, but
it's up on that table.
I'm not going to move. But Refuse Music Volume 2, Krang mixtape, cover mount
mixtape episode.
Curated by
Casey Chaos. It's got some great stuff on it. Yeah. By the way, it's got Cave-In on it. It's got Zyklon B in it, which is going to be interesting.
We toured with him.
Zyklon B?
We did 3 or 4 shows with him. They were called Zyklon at the time. They dropped the B.
Aye.
It was just all Zyklon. Interesting fact, the drummer, when we toured with him, was the black metal guy who stabbed the gay guy to death in the park.
Faust.
He was the drummer.
Yeah.
And he looked like a football casual. But no idea who he was until somebody says, "Do you know who he is?" We've been touring with him. I was like, he's sound, he's brand new, he's talking away. In fact, he was the only guy in the band that was sound. He's like, he's Faust. I'm like, who the fuck's Faust?
Proper wronging.
Aye, man. But just shows you.
That's mad.
So it's going to be an interesting episode.
Yeah.
Don't think we're going to get entirely away for the Nazi teams.
That seems unlikely.
No, Casey Chaos is fucking compiled it. I know he's a bit of a twat, isn't he? Well, he was a bit of a twat. He's dead now.
Good taste in music, though.
He came for the hardcore scene, man. He was a punk.
Surprisingly good compilation. But yep, Dave will be here talking shit about that.
He's risen.
Nice one.
Coming back. Might be in a new location then, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Let's wait and see. Joe, thanks for coming in.
No bother,
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you,
brought your big boy pants as a
listen, man, I wasn't going to defend the cunt. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm very much just like, hey, I liked it at the time, man.
Man, I think that's fine. As you know, like I probably would have liked it at the time as well if I'd got into it.
Best case scenario, we get a rise out of him.
I would love to interview him.
Yeah.
Immortal Technique?
Yeah, I think that'd be class.
Would you just acquiesce or would you challenge a boy?
I'd let you challenge him.
That would be really.
I've seen him in the skin, man. He's no skinny. He's fucking he's wee, but he's like that. He's like a fridge, man.
That's what Zoom's for.
That's what Zoom's for. Exactly, man. No, thanks for having us, man.
That's been good. We'll have to have you back soon to maybe we'll do Queen or something eventually.
Oh, I'll do Queen, man.
Yeah, we've not done it.
I'll do Queen.
Good luck getting a word in that week.
I'm fine with that. I'll just sit back.
Listen, man, you do it, man. I'll be here if it's a Queen one. I'll do it 100%.
You guys can discuss that afterwards.
I'll make you a Queen fan, mate. Don't you worry.
I'm not a Queen fan. I just know that he's got some strong opinions on the records that he likes by them. So it would be an interesting chat.
Oh, aye.
Anyway, yes. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe. New video, whatever it is, right here. Watch that, and goodbye.